And we're live.
And thank you, Larry, the Liberty Guy. And on probably no other day of the year is this that song, that John Kiley rendition of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." More appropriate, or it could be, one for the weather. But it's opening day in Major League Baseball. Normally a big event. Not sure how many of you are still following it all. So I'm going all Red Sox out today. We've got the cap. We've got the dugout. Kind of looks like the Fenway Park dugout. Not exactly. And I've got my old jersey on as well. So it's opening day, and it's a big day for a bunch of reasons today. Not only is it opening day, and the game. Now the Red Sox game has been postponed, even though they could have played today. Clearly, also tomorrow is going to be a better day, and it was a scheduled off day. So why play in 45-degree rainy weather when you could play tomorrow in 60-degree sunny weather? So that's it. I don't have a problem with that. They usually don't cancel baseball games, but I think this one was a good call. All right. It's also a big day because first of all, coming up today, I've got a bunch of topics to cover. The crucifixion of the truth. Dan McKee finally weighs in on the Act on Climate. And our center had a major report put out today. Quickly go through those later today. Our guest, Patricia Morgan, is going to join us in about 10 or 15 minutes to talk about the hearing yesterday on her bill, which would ban the teaching of critical race theory. All right. And she even appeared on Fox News this morning to talk about it. And then, of course, in the second half of our show, as is our Thursday tradition, we'll have Dr. Andrew Bostom on all things COVID and your questions. So remember, please go ahead and put your comments in the comments section if you want me to ask a question of Dr. Bostom. Okay, this is Holy Thursday, and it's Easter weekend. By the way, happy Easter, a blessed Passover to you as well, if depending on your faith. My faith is strong. I'll admit it. I'm a Catholic. Starting tomorrow, there's a routine I go through with myself privately alone in the afternoon with my family as well. And then, of course, Easter Sunday, and we will be having a family dinner. All of the senior folk in our family have been vaccinated. So we're gonna have a somewhat normal Easter dinner, although we will be careful. All right, so it's Holy Thursday is the second, and Holy Week, it's a second big reason why this is a big day. And the third reason, which we'll get to in a second, is this is also April Fool's Day. And I'm going to give to you, after the crucifixion of the truth segment, the 10 biggest lies that the left are fooling you on, that have been out there for years and probably will continue for years. Because we are living in a false reality, folks. We are. I mean, there are so many mistruths out there. You know, the Bible says, if you know the truth will set you free. And the opposite is true with lies. You know, lies trap you. You can't. You don't have any maneuverability. They imprison your thoughts. They imprison what you can say because you have to be careful not to reveal the lie. And it puts you subjugated to those who initiated the lies, who are counting on you to perpetrate the lies. You know, Ronald Reagan, the guy that turned me into a conservative, in his famous 1964 speech at the Republican, at the convention, he called it a time for choosing. And he said, it isn't so much that liberals are ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. They know so much that isn't so. And that's absolutely true. And the flip side of that is that if they're going to put forth the lies, then they have to crucify the truth. So I hope you don't mind the biblical references, but I'm gonna take it to one more level here. Crucifixion of the truth. Now, what else happened before Christ was crucified? Barabbas was set free. And in this analogy, he's the lie. He's the evil. And he was a criminal. I think he was a murderer, if I recall my history properly. So in lieu of the truth, the light, the way, Jesus Christ, a murderer in Barabbas was loosed upon the people. And these top 10 lies I'll get to in a minute are the Barabbas analogy. If you want to keep to the Barabbas analogy, I think it works. What do you think? I mean, right in there, I think it kind of works. So let's move on to that. The fake news, the false narratives. It is April Fool's Day again, but they've been fooling you on these things for years and decades. So just before I get to those lies, in keeping with the biblical analogy a little bit, it is Holy Week, it is Easter weekend for Christians, and we believe that after being crucified, that Christ physically rose from the dead on the third day, of course. And Christians believe that in embracing this, what is a historic fact, at least his crucifixion anyway, historic fact, faith will have you believe in the rest, and that by developing a relationship with Christ, a person can obtain salvation, not being trapped and not being imprisoned like you are if you're a liar or if you represent evil. That's how you find your way to salvation. But when you lie, as the left does, progressive Americans do, they've drifted away from this Christian orthodoxy of salvation in order to get you to heaven. And they're trying to create heaven in their own image, what they perceive as heaven right here on earth. And they don't mind trampling your rights and telling you how to live your life. I mean, just look at the last year. They don't mind doing that. Because they think they're the moral ones and they think they can impose that morality on everybody else. That's not freedom and that's not America. I mean, they almost want you to believe that you're immoral if you believe in the constitutional values of this country. So let's go through the top on this April Fool's Day. Let's go through the top 10 lies, the top 10 Barabbas narratives that crucify the truth that the left is trying to peddle on you. All right. Number one, and we'll start with religion, that religion is hate. All right. The left actually wants you to believe that religion is bad for our society. In fact, Karl Marx said it himself. The first requisite of the happiness of the people is the abolition of religion. All right. That's Marxism. That belief in God and an organized religion cause hatred and oppress the people. We all know that's a lie. That's lie number one. Lie number two, of course, climate change is the greatest threat to mankind. There's no imminent threat. There's no imminent threat. Every prediction they've made has been wrong. Every single one has been wrong. But yet this fear persists. This lie persists. Next, which is one of the things we'll probably talk about with our guest coming up in a few minutes, Patricia Morgan, is that white people are privileged. You talk to my wife, you talk to a lot of people I know didn't grow up with any privilege. And it's not privilege. Women are disadvantaged. I mean, in our society today, women have never, ever enjoyed such freedom, such opportunity, such prosperity, such status politically in the corporate world, in academia. There has never been a better time, I don't think anywhere in the world, for women. I'm sorry, but they are not disadvantaged. Capitalism is for the greedy rich. Again, false, a Barabbas evil lie. No economic system in the history of this planet has brought more people out of prosperity than capitalism. And conversely, that big government and dependency on big government is good for the poor. No, it's not. It's stifling. It keeps you down. It allows you to accept an educational system that is ruining, if not providing opportunity for your children. Big government is not good for the poor. Big government allows the poor to live on some government defined minimum level of sustenance. That's it. If you aspire for anything more than that, which I think every human being does, then big government is not for you. Open borders are compassionate. I don't even have to explain that one. I mean, just look, is that compassion what you're seeing on the border right now? Is that compassion? And then you think of the jobs that are being taken away, the taxes that are being increased, the seats in school rooms that are being taken, the wealth, the health money that's being, and welfare money being spent that poor people in this country have to pay. Is that compassionate? Number 8, if you don't agree with the left, you're a racist. I got to tell you a quick story. I went to a concert 2 years ago in Saratoga Springs. I saw Hootie and the Blowfish. The warm-up band was Bare Naked Ladies. And they said, okay, this is a sing-along song. Sing-along song. And I want you to look to your left and look to your right. Look to the person standing there with you, whether you know them or not, and encourage them to sing along. And you know what? If you see that they're not singing, they're racist. That was a joke. It was actually pretty clever. I was kind of surprised. So it kind of told me something about the bad. The 9th big lie: Constitution is outdated, unfair, and unnecessary. There has never been a greater document written in the history of mankind. It provides, if we follow those constitutional principles, again, it's the big government. It does not allow for big government, but big government is destroying minority and low-income families. The constitutional principles work. And the last big lie is what we just allude to, that America is racist and evil at its core. And this is what we're going to talk to in just a minute with our guest, Patricia Morgan, but I got to give you 2 other very quick updates, and then we'll get to Representative Patricia Morgan. Our center put out today a report. In fact, I will show it to you on our website. It's right there at the top of our website, rifreedom.org. It's not a long report, but it's an important report. Every state and municipality in America is going to be getting billions, if not millions, tens of millions of dollars to spend. And there are certain federal rules around how you can spend that money at the state and municipal level. But there's also some guidelines we suggest. There's the federal rules, some national highlights, overall risks. We talk right up front about this idea of free lunch. There's no such thing. Everybody thinks this is free federal money. There's no such thing as that. This is not free. So we go into this, we kind of go against this modern monetary theory that the left believes you can just spend as much as a federal government as you want. So we dispel that myth. We get into national highlights, the risk to local and state government, the federal aid, and then we show the amount of aid coming to every state in the region. There's Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and to every city and town. And then we go through a list of recommendations for state government and for municipal government. So it's right at the top of our page, rifreedom.org. I'll just say that our number 1 recommendation is something we proposed, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago: catch up educational scholarship accounts. A little $500, maybe $1,000, maybe more per family, so they can hire a tutor or sign up for online courses or anything along those lines to help supplement their children's education that's been hurt so bad by all this too much distance learning, right? So it's not for tuition. The teachers union shouldn't be upset with it. It's just extra money to help kids learn. What's wrong with that? Can somebody tell me what's wrong with that? And then finally, so again, we'll talk more about our recommendations next week. And finally, Governor McKee finally made a statement on the Act on Climate. It was a weak statement, but it may have set the stage to kill this bill. Any change in this bill, which he asked for a change in the enforcement provision. In fact, our guest, Patricia Morgan, actually put forth an amendment to say, let's get rid of the whole enforcement section. We don't even agree with the goals of the bill, although the Governor McKee does in his letter he sent, and here is that letter he sent to the chairman of the committee. So he applauds, the goals of the bill, which we don't. But then he goes into to talk about his concern over the enforcement and legal provisions and lawsuit provisions. The reason this is important, at this point in the game, any change to the bill that could make it go back to a committee, go back to a floor vote, could be irreconcilable. And that's my hope. And I think that might be his hope too. I think he wanted to play politics by saying he supports the goals of the bill, but he also wanted to do something that could provide a path to its downfall. It's a little political gamesmanship here. This is how they play it. But any bill that deviates from its original intent, or the House version deviates from the Senate version, just like we saw with the pay equity bill years ago, different versions never get reconciled and they just die on the vine. I hope that's what's happened here. Okay, so we could talk all day with Patricia Morgan about what's going on in this General Assembly, but we're here to talk to her about one specific bill that she had a hearing on yesterday, and that's this critical race theory, which 2 or 3 of those top 10 lies are in this whole critical race theory thing. Patricia Morgan, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Hello, how are you?
You got your Red Sox cap today?
No, I don't, but I know you do.
It's opening day, although the Red Sox aren't playing today, but it is opening day. Okay. Do you want to, all right, yeah, let's just focus right on your bill. If we have time later, we'll get into the climate bill. All right, so you sponsored a bill. You were even on Fox News this morning.
I was, very early.
Excellent. And your bill would basically ban critical race theory being taught. Now, before we get into the bill, just set it up for us. What's the large concern here about critical race theory and what you're trying to accomplish? Then we'll dig into the bill.
Okay, I mean, the bill is easy, quite frankly. It bans teaching or using critical race theory in our schools, and in fact, in any entity in Rhode Island that gets state or local government money.
Which schools?
Well, because I put this bill in, we had verified that it was at Brown, RISD, and URI. But because of this bill, I now have come to realize that it is in all of our colleges and in most of our K through 12 school systems.
So let me ask,
has infiltrated.
With this bill, I'm not saying where is the bill, but where would this ban it would ban it in public K through 12 schools, correct?
In any entity that gets government money.
So that could be
our suppliers,
URI, Rhode Island,
nonprofits that are out there.
Well, let's stay with the schools first. So that would be all the state colleges,
yes.
URI, RIC, and CCRI.
It'd also be Brown University. Brown University gets our money. They take our money.
All right.
They take a lot of our money.
What about
they
private?
Get tax treaties from Providence. They also take grant money for different.
All right. What about private K through 12 schools that don't take money but are under the Department of Education's purview, or other private universities that don't take money? Would they be covered?
I would hope so. I think that might be where I have to tighten it up, but
okay.
Let's explain what CRT is to your viewers. I was a teenager when Martin Luther King was a leader of the civil rights movement. And I heard him on television in his I Have a Dream speech. And in that speech, he set a goal. He set a goal for America. And that goal was that everyone in America would not be judged by the color of their skin, but instead by the content of their character. Those were eloquent words, and they were a good goal that the United States embraced. We really beat segregation. We did a good job as America. We don't have black and white water fountains anymore. We don't have segregation in our schools. Black folks, people.
I think we do now, though, but for the other reason. But go ahead.
Well, Black people have jobs and presence in every part of society, in every kind of finance, banking, construction, doctors, lawyers. They're everywhere. No, everyone is welcomed in the United States. I really think we are not a racist country. What CRT does, critical race theory does, is that just turns that on its head. It is the opposite of the goal. In fact, it wants Americans to judge everyone by the color of their skin. Just the opposite. The content of your character doesn't matter anymore. Only your skin color matters. And every part of American society, our history, every part of America is judged through a racial lens. It is poisonous, and it should not be allowed.
Yeah, I would say that it's teaching divisiveness, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. If this, it does race shaming, right? So you especially think about this in our schools. We would never allow a Black school child to be shamed for the color of his skin. Why would we allow it for white children? We shouldn't. We should never accept it. But that's what's happening. Children are coerced into looking at their skin color and apologizing for it, for taking on all the sins of our past history. It's just foolishness. Today, our society, I don't believe is
It's a
racist.
big lie.
It's a big lie.
It's one of those big lies, right?
Yeah. The Providence Journal, a reporter called me and said, well, look at Providence schools. You've got to say that that's racism compared to Barrington or somewhere else. No, it's not racism. That's a canard to get the politicians in Providence off the hook. Providence gets $1,000 more than the average for every child. So it gets all the resources it needs, but they are mismanaged and they have really poor school leadership, educational leadership.
Right.
One thing, you want me to pause for a minute so you can?
Yeah, let's look at the bill first, and then we'll have some more editorial comments after. But let's just show everyone. So I took a few screenshots that pretty much cover the whole bill. So in the first page, you basically, you define what divisive concepts are.
Yes.
And you list a bunch of things here. That sex is inherently, one sex or race is inherently superior, that America is fundamentally racist.
Everybody has to agree with that.
Yep. An individual, by is sexist or just by the color of their skin. So it goes on and on. Number 7, I highlighted by, that like you were just saying, that white people today, let's say it that way, should bear responsibility for the sins of their white forefathers. I mean, that's a ludicrous idea, right?
But that's what they are trying to do with critical race theory.
Right. Now, you don't mention critical race theory at all in here, right?
No, and this is the reason. If I call it critical race theory, they'll just change the name of it.
Okay, fair enough. So you talk about the principles, the false, evil principles of critical race theory instead of it itself.
Right. Seriously, if you call it by a name, they're immediately going to change the name.
So you talk about
how their way. In fact,
yep.
I got emails and tweets from people saying, you just try to keep it out of our lesson plans. I mean, it was taunting.
All right, we're going to talk about the hearing in just a second. All right, so you list some other ones here, and then you end the final section, talks about any contractor, vendor that receives state money there has to be a clause that says that they ban such practices and teachings in their place of employment as well, basically, right?
Right. I want to protect our school children first, but no employee should be subject to this either.
Now, this sounds a lot like the executive order that President Trump put forth last year on this.
Yeah, you know what? I guess somebody said that. I didn't get it from the federal government.
Is this
I
model
actually-
legislation that other states are doing as
Yeah,
well?
this is the same as New Hampshire.
New Hampshire's doing this also?
Yes.
Okay. Did you write this legislation or did you collaborate with some other people?
I actually borrowed it from New Hampshire.
Okay, fair enough. That's the way it works. That's the way it works.
That's the way
Okay.
it works.
All right. So we had an interesting discussion in our staff meeting today. And this would apply to universities. So how do you square this with the notion of free speech, that a university or a professor should be able to teach or say what they want? How do you square this ban with that principle?
They can still, this is one of the false statements on the left, by the way. Oh, you're not going to let us teach history. We're not allowed to talk about the evils of slavery. That's not what this bill says. What it says is that you cannot coerce people to make statements against their conscience. In the First Amendment, we also have the right to conscience, our own conscience. That's protected. And what professors and teachers are doing is they are coercing speech. And that's prohibited by our Constitution as well.
But to me, there's a bigger issue involved. And I think you would agree, maybe you just didn't say the words here, but yes, I agree. I mean, when it comes to monuments, it's the same argument. We should not run away from our history. We should talk about our history, good and bad, but we should put everything in proper context. While America had the sin and scar of slavery, we stood for so many other things that were so much, you could say bigger or more important or not, but we stood for so many other things. So America was not just these things that we're teaching. America was that shining city on the hill. America was in so many other freedom and fair and equality ways. America stood for something that has never been stood for before, despite these sins. So to me, you can teach slavery, but just put it in the proper context, right?
The leftists don't want to give us any credit. America stopped slavery. Yes. We stopped our own
That's
slavery.
Part of the history too, right?
It wasn't imposed upon us by an outside country. We did it ourselves. We threw it off ourselves because we knew it didn't live up to our principles, the principles in our founding documents. So it's just, they can talk about history. They can even give an opinion, their opinion, but they must say it is their opinion. They can't present it as fact that America continues to be a racist country, and that everybody who is white is a racist, is an oppressor. They're making children admit that because they're white, they are oppressors. I mean, it's beyond.
I mean, we talked about child abuse with the transgender, mutilation and drugs given a kid. This is almost child abuse too, isn't it?
I think it is. I do think it is when you take young children who are very pliable at that age, up through high school and even into college. You want to please your professor, you want to get a good grade, whatever. And they're indoctrinating them, and they're making them say that they want to split the world into oppressor and oppressed.
Yep.
The perpetrator and victim.
Division. That's division.
And the bad people are the white people in their scenario.
Yeah. Purely divisive.
Yeah. So they can talk about our history. They can even, just like we talk about communism or the Holocaust, right? These are things they can talk about. But when they come to talking about racism, it's opinion, not fact in present day.
Teaching it as history. Okay. Yeah. But here's their view. This is something I used a lot. This is what woke is to me. I only see the narrow talking points that my masters tell me to see. Right? That's it. So in this case, yes, there was racism. Yes, there was bigotry. Yes, there was slavery. But there was a hell of a lot else that happened in America. Like you said, we helped end it. There were other freedoms granted and opportunities granted to not just whites, but African Americans throughout our history. But woke means you only see what your masters tell you to see. So again, teaching this stuff without perspective is immoral, I believe. Okay, last question. Go
And
ahead.
we've always taught, they talk about unequal outcomes. And if there's unequal outcomes, well, it has to be racism. I don't think so.
No, I don't agree.
Right? Look at all of our inner cities. I think it's political leadership. I think it's educational leadership. I think there it's mismanagement, but I don't think it's racism.
It's big
And
government.
It sure lets the politicians off the hook, doesn't
Big
it?
government. If you want to ask me,
It
it's a
lets
big
them off
government
the
does.
hook.
All right.
Instead of really searching for the reasons behind disparate outcomes.
All right, tell me
Then
about
they
the
say-
hearing yesterday. Let's go. We got only got about 2 minutes left. Tell me about the
Oh.
hearing. What was the attitude? What were most opinions for, against? I even understand teachers abuse their students, and had them weigh in. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, the hearing was sabotaged. 140 people signed up. 6 of them, the people that I had recruited as national experts. I got national experts from across the country to come in and explain this to the committee and to the people out here in Rhode Island. Not everybody knows what CRT is. And quite frankly, a lot of people are just totally unaware that it's happening. It's infiltrating our schools as we speak. So this was about giving people knowledge. Some teachers in Barrington assigned to their students.
High school teachers?
Yeah. High school teachers assigned to their students to call in and say they were going to testify. And because there was such a large number, Chairman McNamara said everybody could only have 1 minute to talk. Now imagine, I had expert witnesses, subject matter witnesses. I said
1
this
minute?
at the beginning.
1 minute?
They were limited to 1 minute. And the clerk was over there calling through the list.
Testifying.
People weren't answering. The phone was ringing. It was going to voicemail. One child finally answered and said, "Oh, I'm not interested in this. My teacher told me to do this."
That should tell you everything you need to know. How contrived. So this is what we talked about, right? This is what I talked about at the top. Everything, we're operating under a contrived, fake, evil. Again, I'm using the biblical reference today only. Barabbas, we're choosing Barabbas evil over Christ's truth. We're crucifying the truth, and we're manipulating people to put forth lies, just like the teachers did with these kids. I mean, this is happening in every area of our politics, our media, our corporate world. It's amazing.
And this is the reason. They know that if the good people of Rhode Island, the parents out there, hear about critical race theory and know that it's in their schools, that those parents will act to stop it.
I hope. I don't have as much faith as you do. I mean, I don't have as much faith as you do. These soccer moms seem pretty hypnotized to me.
Well, some of them are. There's no doubt some of them are. But most of the people would be horrified that we are taking young children and making them confess that they have white privilege and therefore they are oppressors.
All right. What was the reaction, if you could gauge, of your fellow committee members? And does this bill, I know it's a Democrat, woke, leftist state. So what was the reaction of the committee members? And do you think this bill has any chance of moving?
Not this year, but I am going to build some support. I have to start getting people to, I need to educate Rhode Island about what critical race theory is. But let me just tell you one thing. Chairman McNamara did something that is unprecedented to me yesterday, because at the end of the hearing, he went around to everybody in the room and he asked them, "Well, what do you think?" He was inviting them to bash me. It has never, ever happened. I've been in that house for 9 years, and this has never been done. But this was for all of them to get up and flail themselves and say, "Oh yes, I hate racism, and Patricia Morgan is a white supremacist."
And did they all do that?
Huh?
And did they all do that?
Every one of them that was there Not one of them said, I'd like to learn more about this. I think it's disturbing. Not one person. But all of them decided that they could pile on me. And listen, I'm a big girl. Mike, by this time in my life, I've got a pretty thick skin. Not too much penetrates it. But that was unprecedented, right? He's the chairman of the Democrat Party. You guys should all know that. And he wanted to make sure that everybody was in his control. He wanted to get him on record, and he wanted to make me feel like I was the villain. I'm not the villain here. I'm standing up for children. Leave our children alone.
All right.
They are not responsible.
All right, Rep. Morgan, thank you. We'll have you back on if this bill moves, and let you and I together educate Rhode Island on this. Representative Patricia Morgan, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, right before we bring on Dr. Boston, by the way, Larry, the Liberty guy, is Dr. Boston with us?
Not quite yet, Sten. So you have a few more minutes.
All right, if you could ping him or not. I lost my train of thought here. Well, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but it just goes back to the, oh, I know what it was. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. Neither is Representative Morgan. I really don't understand the psychology that somebody who, like Representative Morgan, who puts forth a bill decrying any form of racism, that people can stand up there and beat their chests and falsely claim that she is the racist or the white supremacist. Now, this is what I don't understand. Do they really believe this? And if so, how can they be so gullible? Or are they just completely shameless and playing a political game? I wish I knew. It's the same thing when we had on Dr. Cretella and Senator Morgan last week to talk about the biological boys playing women's sports. Do people really think? I mean, can they honestly think that it's fair for a boy to play against girls in an organized sport? Are they really gullible and completely brainwashed? Or are they just nasty, evil, Barabbas type politicians who want to crucify the truth and put forth political lies, knowing that it's lies, knowing they're being political, but playing the game nonetheless? Which is it, do you think? I don't know which one it is. I mean, they really seem like they believe this crap. But we also know they're political animals to the nth degree. Is it one? Is it the other? Is it both? I don't know. Well, let's bring on Dr. Andrew Boston. And listen, and this is another area. I didn't list it in my top 10 because it'd probably go away, but we know that the truth has been crucified when it comes to COVID-19. And we know that in favor of Barabbas type evil lies and misinformation. I mean, Dr. Boston, I know you're not a Christian like I am, but would you agree that over the course of these last 13, 14 months, we've seen that to be true, that the truth is being crucified in lieu of some evil narrative?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, basic epidemiologic principles have been turned on their head. Immunology has been turned on its head. Mike, I saw good for Matt Allen for sort of cutting through the baloney. But a WPRI reporter was on with him today, right before the presser, and he was he did a story about trying to figure out the numbers, how to get to the governor's 70% vaccinated, and And the reporter, the WPR reporter, Eli Sherman, is basically just giving the party line that the only vaccination that the only immunization that counts is immunization through vaccination. And Matt had to point out to him, well, what about this mass of people that have been infected? They're immune too. And then
guess who texted Matt to say that?
I did too. Me too. Well, we both did that. But the point is that even though Sherman conceded that on the air, if you go back to his actual story, his story mentioned nothing about natural immunity.
Natural immunity and those who have had the disease and built up some.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right? Both the people who may have been resistant from the get-go, but also the surviving people who survived the infection.
So basically, what you're saying here is what McKee said last week in more specificity, and alluded to this week when asked, is that he's relying on how many people have been vaccinated before he determines that we're at some level of herd immunity so that they can undo the state of emergency. And this is the chart that shows that we're not going to get to that 70% until, way out here in, June or something like that. But you and I have talked about this before. If you include those other groups of people, naturally and originally resistant, and those who have had it in some form and have developed that immunity, and you add those, we might even be there now.
Well, exactly. And you judge that not by infections, especially given all the pitfalls that we're dealing with in terms of PCR testing and what some of these positive tests actually mean. And then there's another problem with the testing, Mike, which I think we alluded to previously. We're seeing a spike right now in seasonal coronaviruses that cause common colds, particularly two that are called OC43 and NL63. But they circulate and they tend to spike in the early spring, and we're seeing a big spike of those. CDC monitors them, private labs monitor them, and there's a big spike right now. And there's some cross reactivity in terms of the PCR tests, which can lead to false positives as a result of these common cold causing coronaviruses. So, the metrics, Mike, we've talked about this for a long time. The metrics you really have to follow are hospitalizations and deaths. Right. And even with hospitalizations and deaths, you get contamination from this just insane mass testing.
Yeah. We'll get to those numbers in a minute, but let's go back to the herd immunity. One more area. Now, it's I would say, you tell me, but I would say the reason they don't, you can count the number of vaccinations, right? We can count that, right? We can do that. You can't count. We have no idea how many people were naturally immune. We have no idea how many people were asymptomatic and had it and never reported it or never.
We have some surrogates for a few of these things.
So really, it's impossible to know.
Mike, we do just to interrupt. We have some surrogates. So, for example, we can just look at the dashboard for the state and see that there's, like 137,000 people that have been infected, and then subtract those that have succumbed to the disease, and you're still over 130,000 people who've been infected and survived. Well, then the CDC makes an estimate that it's about 4.6 asymptomatic undetected infections for each detected infection.
So that's a CDC standard.
That's a CDC estimate. Now, it gets gray because of this crazy mass testing. A lot of that 132,000 people were also asymptomatic and were dragged in and tested for God knows whatever reasons. So it is hard to get a handle, but let's cut that number in half and then multiply.
So we know 300,000 or 400,000 people in that category, right?
It could be that high, plus additional people that have been vaccinated that weren't in that pool that were naturally infected, recovered, etc. And then you throw in people, particularly children, who have been resistant to this from the get-go.
Yep.
And so. Yeah, I think it is every once in a while, Dr. Scott will throw in, we're still doing some, serology. So in other words, testing crudely for antibodies.
Yeah.
Doesn't share much of the information. I don't know how well it's going. It's a limited way to assess, sort of asymptomatic infections.
All right.
But there are all kinds of ways, Mike, they'll model everything. They'll model, 6 to 11
except for how
times the
many
number of
people might be immune.
hospitalizations.
Yeah.
Pat Ford finally got that, addressed that. Of course, they totally blew him off.
I was thinking the same thing. Why aren't they modeling this? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But they wouldn't answer Pat's question, and they wouldn't give any names, certainly.
Yeah.
But the problem is the people that told us that we were going to have 4,300 people in the hospital on May 2nd or 3rd are probably unnamed people, are probably the same people modeling to tell us when we can lift the restrictions.
All right, let's quickly go through the numbers. I've got a little bit different set of charts. So here you see the cases, slightly ticking up. We'll see how that goes. But again, cases don't matter that much.
What?
Like you said,
Mike, the best thing that Scott did today, I give her credit for this. I don't give her credit for much because, I think she doesn't deserve it. But today she did point out that we have had a steady percent positivity rate, in the neighborhood of 2 to 2.5%.
There it is here.
But then she also admits that the reason we seem to have higher numbers of cases, perhaps if you judge on that scale, is because we're testing up the wazoo.
All right, so there's the positivity. You can see it's been really up and down, but it's been just slightly higher than it was a few weeks ago. So we'll keep an eye on that. Then,
well, if you look at the weekly positivity, it's really flat for
2.1 and 2.4. Yeah. All right. Here's hospitalizations again, the tiniest of upticks. It is true, right, that hospitalizations and deaths, if they're going to occur, will lag cases, right?
Yeah, but we're still we never got an answer about who are these people, Mike?
That modeled the 2,400 beds, right?
Yeah. Well, no. Who are the people that are coming in that have a non-COVID diagnosis which precipitates the hospitalization and
like
then happen to test positive?
Like a broken leg. You're in there for a broken leg, but you happen to have
any other major admission. If you test positive, the Department of Health has admitted that they count those as COVID. And the reason they give, Mike, is now this has I think this has some economic justification, but the reason they give has no clinical justification. They say because, they have to be isolated and things like that. Well, that's fine. So bill more for that if you're entitled to it, but don't call it a clinical COVID case.
Right. Agreed. And so that's hospitalizations. Deaths, you can see, have had some 0 days and steadily going down. So,
but by the way, Mike, Dr. Scott, again, I was surprised that she did this. She talked about the 5 new deaths. She had to report 5 new deaths. Yep. Well, of course, the public assumes 5 people died yesterday. There were 2 deaths. That's one of these really Orwellian uses of words that they're new deaths that could have been adjudicated from days to weeks ago, and they happen to be reported today. And so when you're down to very low numbers, there's a big difference between 2 and 5.
Yep. All right, you sent me this chart. Go ahead, take it away.
Oh yeah, this is fantastic. This is really reassuring. We have to remember that in the United States, for sure, and certainly Sweden, for sure, it was care home, nursing home deaths which drove the mortality for COVID. And what you're seeing here is a dramatic decline through Medicaid, Medicare data in both infections and deaths in the nursing homes. And this has to be, this is some of the most reassuring data that we can have, because this is the population that drives certainly the mortality in this pandemic.
All right, so good news there. Let's go to vaccines. I thought this one was kind of cute.
Well, it's great. I mean, that is a wonderful point. And I don't know, Mike, maybe you didn't want to get into it. I sent you something that I felt, and you don't have to get into it if you don't want to, but I sent you a little clip from Dr. Jha over at Brown that I just found appalling. He was championing these data that came out only through Pfizer. These have not been peer reviewed. They haven't been reviewed by the FDA. It's a press release from Pfizer, which mentions that they had studied 12 to 15-year-olds who were vaccinated, and they say 100% efficacy, short-term efficacy in terms of preventing infection, COVID-19 infection. There were 18 infections, Mike. I mean, you could have 18 more infections over a longer period of follow-up, and the result would be cut in half. This is not the way you evaluate efficacy for anything. And he went on, Dr. Zhao went on to say that by the fall, this age bracket could be vaccinated. I just find this kind of stuff appalling. There's no discussion of how absolutely minimal the risk is to children, particularly as you get towards the truly younger age ranges, certainly the entire pediatric age range, which of course would include 12 to 15. And there's no discussion of the fact that even the mass amount of vaccination that's going on now is all under emergency use authorization.
Right. So
Not a single one of these,
it's experimental still, right?
not a single one of these vaccines has been studied long enough to get FDA licensure. And, that takes a minimum of 2 years. We're at best about a year into that process.
What if there was let me ask this, Doc, if there was a harmful long-term impact here, even though we know young children, for whatever reasons, are less susceptible to catching and having any severe problems with the virus, if there were any issues with the vaccine, would younger, weaker bodies like children be more susceptible to those potential adverse effects?
Well, when you don't know, Mike. But the point is that it's one thing to get emergency use. Remember, think of the word emergency. To get emergency use authorization to vaccinate the truly vulnerable, like the institutionalized elderly. Okay, it's a whole other thing to use EUA to vaccinate the least vulnerable in terms of the disease.
Right, who have virtually no risk.
Exactly. So that's why when you're vaccinating healthy populations, whether it's kids or just healthy people in general, the threshold that you have to cross for safety is that much higher, because you have to cross a higher threshold because these people are at so low risk from the disease you're ostensibly trying to prevent from happening in them. So you have to have longer term data before you can pressurize and compel people to take that kind of vaccination.
Well, we know that's not what's going to happen. Look, here's Rutgers and other schools. I mean, we're going to talk to some parents next week who, kids are being forced to take these experimental emergency use tests that haven't even been FDA approved.
As far as I know, not a single one of the PCR tests has been approved officially.
Yep. And
they're all still under EUA.
And here, but we're already going to start.
But that's just a test, Mike. That's just a test.
Yeah, well, this one is Rutgers is going. Now they're going to mandate vaccines again for a population that's not vulnerable.
But again, Mike, if you were thinking of that select group of kids or young adults, like there's a reporter at WPRI that has cystic fibrosis, that's a whole different equation. Then, because the risk might be high despite the chronological age, that becomes a consideration. But healthy college kids, Mike, I did the best I could to study what was going on between August and the Thanksgiving break on campuses. And I personally reviewed dashboards and then tracked down news reports as best I could. I uncovered close to 140,000 positive tests in 100 major universities across the United States. And I could only find 17 hospitalizations. And when I looked into whatever information was publicly available on those hospitalizations, there were a few that were very serious, but most of them were short-term visits for hydration after very high fevers. Out of 140,000 positive tests.
So this goes to what we were talking about with Patricia Morgan a little while ago, and what this mania, whether it's on critical race theory, whether it's on transgender that denies the science, that denies reality, yet becomes such a, oh, I don't even know, such a way of life, a mantra, such important stuff, even climate change. What, I know you're not a psychologist, Doc, but what kind of mindset compels people to just accept these thoughtless, non-science-based remedies, often to solutions that don't even exist, but yet have such huge impacts
I
in
mean,
our life? How do so many people fall prey to that?
There are cult-like elements to this.
It is.
It's
It
very,
is
it's
cult-like.
very interesting that, people who used to be called, rational skeptics
Yeah.
are no, this is the transference that goes on. They're considered now to be cult-like, and they're not linked. They're independent people, and yet the masses that follow these bizarre dictates, they don't see in themselves any cult-like behavior. It's really disconcerting. It's really
but
disconcerting.
to further that same point, these cult-like ideas that we used to laugh about before, all these silly politically correct ideas, we used to laugh about it at the water cooler, at the dinner table. They're not. It's now the prevailing conventional wisdom. This is what wokeness is. And if you don't agree, we're the weird ones.
Well, what is more emblematic of cultism than the use of masks? Cloth masks and paper masks by the entire public, when all the objective evidence that's out there, the gold standard evidence, is negative. Again, it's certainly in medicine, I have never seen anything like that. I have never seen an intervention where all the randomized controlled trials are negative, and yet the public health system manages to force it upon the public anyway.
All right, only a couple more questions. Since you mentioned masks, we got to bring up our favorite doctor. We got to do a funny on Dr. Fauci, a Fauci funny. I mean, this guy is out there telling us to wear masks, 2 masks, 3 masks, changing his tune. Of course, he said we shouldn't wear masks a year ago. So he finally made it.
He doesn't want unvaccinated kids playing together. I mean, it's.
He finally got on the Bass Fishing Channel, the last network he hasn't been on yet, and he's now told the entire world. I mean, this guy is a media, not just we can criticize him, but this guy is a media. I don't know. I won't use.
Well, there's a great takedown. There's a great takedown of him. Apparently, that's now a #1 Amazon bestseller by Steve Deese, called Faucian Bargain.
Oh, really? Faucian.
There's a hunger for it, apparently, because it's the #1 book on Amazon.
I'll have to do my homework. I can't remember exactly what the Faustian bargain is, but I know there is one. But all right, last question.
Devil. It's a bargain with the devil.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, pretty simple. Yeah, well, the devil in this case.
The devil gets the soul.
Yeah, well, with Fauci, the devil might be big money or big China. One of those two, probably, right? Okay, last one. We heard this mentioned at the political. This is the national thing now. Here's the new scare. Yes, we're doing great with vaccines, but the new variants are taking hold so fast that the vaccines aren't going to be able to catch up with the new variants.
Okay, Mike, let me run through the variant story real fast, because we've done this a number of times. The variant that they're perseverating on is the B117 variant, the so-called UK variant, which came out of Kent, England. England, God bless them, looks to be, probably until the next flu season, looks to be done. I mean, altogether done. They weathered the variant. It became
done.
Yeah. They have like 55% immunity in the population between vaccination and natural immunity. Every index has cratered, including infections, and that's the variant. And there have been multiple studies out of the UK. The one thing that was confirmed is that it does appear to be slightly more infectious. All the data in terms of hospitalization rates and death is equivocal. Move to this country. The 3 southern states, big states that are doing very well, Georgia, Florida, Texas, the B117 variant is now 50 to 60% of their cases. They're all doing well. There was actually a study in the Houston metropolitan area to look at mortality from January 1st through March 7th in Houston hospitals, comparing the new variant to the Wuhan strain, and they saw no difference in mortality. And that was despite the fact that there were slightly higher viral loads with the B117 variant. So, you know, we have ample data to show that, yeah, it's slightly more infectious, but it's not conferring a morbidity and mortality penalty. And I never hear, this is what irks me so much, Mike. You know,
Yeah, they don't mention that part.
That literature is never cited. It's not even cited in a way, well, some of the literature says maybe slightly more. Some of the, it's just the inference is that this is more deadly, this is more infectious, you know, this is the next cudgel to beat you over the head with.
Dr. Andrew Boston, thank you again, always. And you made my point for me, which I'll summarize after we say goodbye. But thank you. Have a happy Passover.
Very happy Easter. Passover is done. You know, I'm back to
Passover's done. I'm sorry, I'm not up on that.
Not for my wife.
I hope you had a happy Passover.
Tonight I'm breaking it.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Doctor. Have a very thoughtful
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. We'll see you next week. So again, folks, you see Dr. Boston, just, you know, this theme that we've been discussing today, the crucifixion of truth and the loosening of evil narratives, falsehoods into society, like Barabbas, the crucifixion like Christ, the truth. Is everything in our I mean, these 10 lies, these 10 that crucify the truth and that are Barabbas type evil themselves are dominating our society, and they are lies, folks. They are fooling you. It's April Fool's Day. And you know, when we say, you know, how many of us have said everything is upside down, right? Everything in this world is upside down. Everything we know to be true, there seems to be a prevailing attitude to say, well, no, that's not really true. This is true instead. These are the lies. This is how the truth is being crucified. And this is how the evil lies are dominating our world today. So we'll continue with that theme. I'll probably stop with the biblical references. I'm only doing it now because it was Holy Thursday, but thanks for joining us again. Opening day for Major League Baseball today. Tomorrow will be the Red Sox. Let's hope for a better season for them as well. And I thank you